All right. All right. Hello, everyone. Is ready to get started? Low-key. This is a QR code. I don't know what it does, but I think you guys do. It's for checking. It's for checking it or something like that. All right. Raffles. We love winning free stuff. So you guys want your free stuff? Scan that, courtesy of VenusHacks. All right. So we're going over introduction to web dev. It's going to cover the whole thing from front end to back end. The most important thing is that you guys come away with the concept, the fundamentals, not really like exactly the syntax, but you know, one saying, you give someone a fish, they eat for a day, teach them how to fish, they become a fish or something like that, right? So, all right, does anybody still need this QR code? All right, cool. I'll show it up at the end anyways. Okay, I do have a separate link that you guys can technically all go to. I'll post it in the channel later. I ripped this straight from one of my previous ones, but I change it up every single year a little bit. So I have, let's see, it's going to be the same content from, or roughly the same content from Hack at UCI 2024, 2023, ZodHacks 2023, ZodHacks 2023. So if you have seen this before, we're going to change it up a little bit. But essentially, I'm going to go through a live coding demo, and then things will go wrong, so we'll work through the bugs. But I'm going to show you guys how you can spin up a front end, a back end, connect it to an API, all in 54 minutes. You guys excited? Yeah, that's the energy I'm looking for. All right, cool. What do you guys need? Not a lot of stuff. So this one talks about ideation. What we need here is, okay, so if you're going to do front-end work, all you need is a code editor and a browser. Code editor, I would prefer VS Code. There, browser, please, Chrome or Firefox. You can use Safari if you're edgy, or Arc if you're really edgy. But those are the best ones. And then for backend, probably Python. That's the one that's most relevant, but you could technically use your backend in every language. But okay, so the way these are split up is there's going to be front-end tasks and there's going to be back-end tasks, and then we'll kind of explain a little bit the differences between them and how they how coding them is going to be different. But know that you can do your front-end task and your back-end task in parallel. You don't have to be done like sequentially or anything. You can do them both at the same time. But obviously, I can't do both at the same time, so I'm going to show you guys how you can do one at the other. We're going to start with front-end because front-end's the more simpler one, I think, to get started. So all we got to do, I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to get rid of this. Let's just create like a brand new folder somewhere. I'm going to put it on my desktop. We're going to call this Venus demo. How about that? And I'm going to open up this folder in my favorite code editor. So that's going to be Visual Studio Code. Boom. And then let's make sure this is big enough. And then also, dark mode's kind of hard to see. So let's pick a theme that we like. Ooh. Ooh, do we want this one? Does this hurt? Okay, it's going to hurt some people's eyes, but it's fine. All right, we're going to use a light mode. All right, so this should be visible for everyone. Notice I have an empty folder, right? It's just this folder that I have right here. Nothing in there. Just created a folder. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call it index.html. Okay. Now we're going to go into a little bit of, oh my, I don't like this cursor thing. What is that? Okay, hold on, sorry. We got to switch this up a little bit. Color theme. Okay, yeah, let's use this one. All right, so web development, we're going to talk about just the front end portion, which is just going to be what you see in the browser, right? So all websites are written in 3 languages, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And the one thing to keep in mind here is that you're not going to be learning 3 separate languages. You're going to be each learning kind of like 1/3 of the overall like web development language, okay? So don't feel overwhelmed. And I'll explain really quickly what these 3 languages do. So HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, there's like these one-line zingers that give out. So HTML denotes the content and the structure of a website. CSS makes a website pretty. And then JavaScript provides interactivity to your website. Okay, so we're going to go with HTML. As I mentioned earlier, it's the content and structure of a website. So we're gonna first use a boilerplate. This is why I like VS Code. They have something called an emmet tag where you can type exclamation mark, and then you get this little emmet abbreviation pop up. Make sure it's big enough. Oh, that's huge. And then all I gotta do is press enter. Boom, and it gives me the boilerplate code. All right, so now it just generates all this stuff. What is this? How do I run a website? Well, the good thing is if you guys have done like C++ or Java before, you're like, oh, I gotta install the JDK, the JRE, I gotta compile it, I gotta a.out, run it. Everybody inherently can run a website because a website is essentially just your browser, right? So our browser, luckily for us, is not only our it's our running platform, it's our executing platform, it's also our testing and debugging platform. So the browser is actually really powerful. If you guys have ever like inspected Element because you guys had like a bad report card or something and you guys wanted to like fudge one of these like values, you know, you can change the letter to like a C instead of a D. Only if you're a bad student, none of us here are, but you can actually edit this stuff, right? It's not going to change the actual grade, it's just going to change the display because that's how the HTML works. All right. So we're going to open this up. How do we open this up? Well, the easy way is we could just double click this. And if you notice, since our computer sees like, hey, it's a .html file, it knows that it's a website. By default, oh, it's gone now, but you can see that it has like a Mozilla Firefox icon for it. I'm just going to open it. You can choose to open it in a code editor, which will show the actual HTML code that you can edit, or you can choose to open it in a browser. And a browser will say, hey, it's a .html file. I know how to render HTML files. It's a website, and it's going to render it as a website, which is why you don't see all of this text here. Now, all this text here doesn't actually mean anything for the actual content of the website. All the content of your website goes inside the body. So everything else here is boilerplate code. I can talk a little bit more about that if you are interested. But essentially, like if I actually type stuff in here and I refresh this page, boom, you see the content, right? So once again, HTML content and structure. So I have the content down. What does the structure mean? So all HTML is written using these concepts called tags. And you can notice a tag by this less than and greater than sign. And notice that every single tag has an opening tag and a closing tag, with the exception of some of them, which is just because they don't require one. It just makes sense for it. But if I wanted to create like a button component, button, and I can type like click me, save that and refresh that, boom, and then let's put some more text after this. So I mentioned earlier that HTML is the content. So you can see here's all the text, here's the button, here's more text, and that content displays. I also mentioned that it displays the structure, and the structure here is like, hey, this thing comes first, this thing comes second, this thing comes third, and more importantly, this click me text goes inside of the button between the opening and closing tags, and that's how you can denote this. And it seems like a simple concept, but realistically, this is how you actually create every single website in existence with these concept of like nesting things inside of it and all that stuff. Not just the structure, but like exactly how it gets positioned and stuff, that's going to be CSS job. So let's go into CSS. How can we do CSS? Pretty simply, we're going to link it. So we're going to type link type equals to text slash CSS rel equals style sheets. And then href equals to, and then where does our CSS file live? Let's call it styles.css. And I'm going to self-close this tag, hold down command click, and it's going to say, hey, this file doesn't exist. Let's create it. And notice the dot slash here means that it's in the current folder, another file called styles.css. So if I command click into this, it will go straight to that. All right, cool. So what does CSS do? CSS actually has a really simple syntax, and this is probably like the easiest language you'll pick up. You'll pick it up in like, well, right now. So syntax is pretty simple. It's based off of three main concepts. So the first one is going to be a selector, okay? And then following a selector is going to be curly brackets, and then it's going to be a list of key and values. And then you can have very multiple key values. And so I mentioned earlier, CSS makes things pretty, right? So what does that mean? Let's comment this out. That's the general syntax of it. But we're going to select something, right? What element of our HTML website do we want to make pretty? In this case, let's say we want to make our button pretty. So we're going to say button. And then we're going to give it a list of key value pairs. And these are going to be property, or I should probably call it property. property value. Nope, it's proper now. So what's the property example? A property could be a background color, and the value could be green. And if I refresh this, you get a green looking button, right? There's a whole bunch of properties you can apply. There's color, which is going to be the text. Color, red. So we got a Christmas looking button. Boom. We want to make it like bigger. Height, 400 pixels. Width, 400 pixels. We get a perfect box. We give it border radius. It's going to be rounded on the corners. And then, oops, wait, second one. Boom, we get this ginormous thing, and it looks like this, and it's ugly. So, of course, with great power comes with great responsibility. You can make things pretty, but you can also make things horrendous. So I've chosen to make this horrendous. It's a green button with a red flick me text. But this is like literally all CSS. If you look at any website, let's go for one. Let's go to Yelp. You know what? Let's plug the club. Design at UCI. All right. So everything here, it looks really fancy, but everything here, all the positioning you can see in the styles, it's just a list of selectors and also their properties and values that give them make them look like what they do. So if I go to this button, for example, you'll see that, hey, I have a box shadow around it. Can't really tell, but it like glows towards the end. That's a box shadow. There's padding, which is a space between the content and the edge of the button. Color, this is the text color, background color of the button. And you can do this for any website. You can go on any website, look at inspector element and see what styles are being applied. This is one way you can learn CSS. You like, oh my goodness, this website's really cool. I wonder how they did it. And then you get disappointed because you find out the whole thing is an image. So what happens is you can just look into this, figure out all the cool stuff about it, and then it's just a trial by error. There's like, I guess like some cool stuff we can do. Let's see. You can apply stuff like hovers onto it. So if someone hovers onto the thing, we can make like the height, I don't know, smaller or something like that. What benefit this gives you, I have no idea, but you could do that. You could also change the colors. So let's set the background color. Oh, I have a terrible idea. All right, let's turn the background color red, and then the text color green. Holy moly! Oh God, this is terrible. And then since these are opposite colors, this is going to look even worse. You can also do stuff like transition. So like whenever this value changes, we're going to slowly blend it. So whenever the color changes, we're going to blend it over 300 milliseconds. And now it's slowly, oh, let's make it even longer. So it's terrible. So let's do 3 seconds. So now over the course of 3 seconds, it will slowly, oh, that's a nasty middle color. So like I mentioned, with great power comes great responsibility. You can make things look really pretty. You can make things look really ugly. This is like all CSS, right? It's just making things look pretty. Okay. Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's a funny one. All right, and the last thing is JavaScript, right? So JavaScript gives interactivity to our web page. So how do we do that? We're going to link it slightly differently than the way we did CSS. We're going to use a script tag. We're going to say source equals to, and then we're going to close it like this. And then we're going to say /script.js. Okay, I'm going to command click into this, and it's going to say, doesn't exist. Let's create the file. And then I'm going to create a function here. Let's call this clicked. And then what it's going to do is it's just going to console.log hello. Oh, Jello. It's Jello now. And console.log is our way of printing in this language. So how do we do that? Let's attach this. So one thing to understand about web development is that web development inherently is an event-based programming paradigm. What that means is like normally when you write like Python or C++, you usually just like type a command in your terminal and it just executes. That's just a script. An event-based paradigm, you trigger JavaScript based off of events. Okay, and there's a ton of events that go on. The most common one is going to be an onClick. So if someone clicks on an element, what do? We're going to call that clicked function. Boom. And it's a link through the script tag. So that's how it knows, hey, call this. Boom, I click this button and nothing's happening. So how do we figure out what gets printed? Well, we use our trusty inspect element. So if I right click anywhere on the page, you can do inspect. If you're on Mac, you can do Command Option I. There's a tab here. When you get really into the weeds of web development, you will use every single one of these tabs. Network performance is a huge one. But for us, we usually don't care. So now the console is going to show us our print statements. If we click on this, boom, you'll see that the Jello counter is increasing. And this is just because we're printing the same thing. So it's just going to keep adding it, but just know that it's constantly printing Jello over and over again. So that's interactivity. We got 40 minutes. Okay. There's one more thing that's going to be a little bit. Okay. So right now it just looks like, okay, JavaScript's kind of basic. Maybe you can like do some math off of this. But the most powerful part about this is that the JavaScript is able to influence our web page itself. We can bring dynamic interactions into our website. So how we do that is we're going to create like a div, and a div is essentially just a generic box that actually shows nothing. If you look at it on the web page, let's see the elements. Oh, this thing is ginormous now. Let's close this. That's our div. It's got nothing in it, so it doesn't really visibly show, but it's there. We can put some text inside of this, and it's just a box, right? It's just a box that goes around this text. What we can do, and to provide some interactivity, we can add an attribute called an ID. And this is going to be unique identifier. Let's just call this display, like that. And what we can do is we can say document.get element by ID, display, inner HTML equals to Jello there. And then now when I click on this button, it changes that text to Jello there. Okay. So let's recap. Our HTML is able to call the JavaScript function because it is defined here in the HTML. The JavaScript will then be able to trigger or use parts of the HTML using this document object. Okay, and then this is how you can set HTML elements. Any questions so far? I'll give it some time. Yes. Do I need the console log? It's just a print statement, right? Like it's actually like in production applications, it's best practice to get rid of the console log. If you ever go on any production website, and if you see something in here, that means that's probably not good. So clearly, these are just my extensions, so it doesn't actually show much. Yeah. If you go on like Discord, it'll be like, or if you go on Facebook, maybe if I just use this one, they will tell you like, if someone asked you to, oh no, I'm gonna leave my Facebook. Yeah, so they give you like a warning that says like, hey, don't, someone told you to use the console for some reason, this is bad. So yeah, the console is really only for developer testing. So yeah, you generally don't need the console log. Answer that question? Okay, any other questions? All right, cool. Let's keep going. Let's provide some more interactivity here. So what we can do here is we can create an input tag, and then let's give it an ID of user-input. And then we're going to say the type is equal to text. And we're going to auto close this. And then what we're going to do, just get rid of this. Okay, so now back to our website. We got nothing but this horrendous button. You know, let's get rid of this hover thing. It's killing me. All right. All right, so now we have this text and we have our display here. What happens is we want to be able to read the user input, right? This is how we can interact with the user aside from just mouse clicks. So what we can do is we can use this exact same document.get element by ID, user-input, but we're going to get the value of it. And this is just a property that exists in the HTML element itself. And let's create a variable. So let's call it user input equals to that. And then we will set the display equal to the user input. So all this is going to do is it's going to read whatever the user types here and display it over there. And I can do this as many times as I want. Irvine, California. Oh, that's terrible. But yeah, makes sense. This is how we can get like a full range of interactivity, take any sort of user interaction. I just showed you the basic ones, button with an on-click and then an input with like just reading it. There's other ones, sliders, radio buttons, whatever bloats your float. Really just like go to the MDN and just like figure out like, hey, what are all the HTML stuff that I can do? There's a whole bunch of stuff in here, forms, whatever, canvas, video elements, image elements, all that good stuff. All right, with that, we got 36 minutes. All right. Now we're gonna go into the backend. We're gonna put this on hold. We're gonna assume your front end has been diligently working on creating this masterpiece, and then simultaneously at this exact same time, your backend team is working the backend stuff. So how does our backend work? Okay. Let's go back to our Venus demo, and actually, I'm just gonna create a new folder. So the benefits of having like your backend and your front end separate is that it's just easier to work with. You don't have like conflicting files or anything like that. If you have GitHub repositories, you don't run into merge conflicts, stuff like that. So I'm just gonna go ahead and create a new directory, and I'm gonna call it Venus demo backend. Okay, and I'll go inside Venus demo. Oh, that's not the right one. Should have named something different. I'm gonna go inside the Venus demo backend. All right, so now I should open this up, and it's a completely empty thing because I have nothing in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a backend server using Flask and Python. This is a web server, and essentially our front end is going to be making requests to our backend. Our backend is going to be handling all the business logic. So a little bit like a conceptual explanation here. The backend's job is to pretty much do all of the heavy algorithm and logic and anything that you need to do. The front end's job is just to be an interface between the human and your service. Okay, so for example, if you are using Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever, if you upload an image, right, the ability to upload the image, view your gallery, edit the image, that's all on the front end. But as soon as you want to post that image and you want to like and interact with other people's content, that's all going to the backend. The backend is going to be like the central store of data, and it handles all the interactions and all the business logic. And I'm going to show you guys really quickly how we're going to do that. So first, I'm going to create something called an app.py file, and let's make this a little bit bigger. And what we're going to use is we're going to use a library called Flask, and Flask is going to be our web server. It's just a wrapper around our Python code that allows our front end to hit it whenever. And what we're going to do is we're going to create, let's see, how do we do this? Off the top of my head, from Flask import Flask. And then we do app equals to Flask underscore name. And then we create a function. We'll call this index. And then it's going to return hello. And then I'm going to add a decorator app.route empty thing. Okay. There's only 5 lines of code here. I'll explain how all this works, but this line should make sense to you. The first and the last one is just a function, returns hello. This is a import line. These are the only 2 lines that might be confusing. This one is just saying we're going to instantiate the Flask app, and then we're going to decorate this function with a endpoint. And I'll show you how this works. First, I'm going to go into here. I'm going to do pip3 install Flask. And then Python did this new thing. I have to use a virtual environment, so we're going to do that. Let's just do this. We're going to create a virtual environment. If you guys aren't familiar with how to do a virtual environment, it's not too difficult to get set up. So I won't explain it, but if you guys have questions about it later, I can help you out with that. So we're going to open up our, it's a bin activate. Yes, so now I'm in my virtual environment, and then I can do pip3 install Flask. Boom, we have it installed. And now we should be able to do Flask run. This should, yeah, I wanted to open up in the virtual environment. Okay, now I should be able to do Flask run. And boom, now it's going to say this is development server, yada, yada, yada. It's running on this port. And this is essentially our server is now running. And if you wanted to put this online or something, you would post this on AWS or something. They'll give you a URL, and you hit that URL. In this case, it's my local host, so I can hit it from my current thing. If I go here, I will get what I returned. Hello. Now what's going to happen is our website is going to hit this endpoint, and then it's going to display the data somehow. Okay, so let's see how we can do that. JavaScript has a function called fetch. We're going to fetch HTTP localhost 5000, and then we're gonna get a response, and then we're gonna convert. Let's do a JSON response actually, and then we'll get the final response, and then we're going to just print it out for now. Console.log the response. Okay, all this is built into JavaScript. Is our front end again. A fetch statement just says, hey, go to this URL and get the data from it. We're going to fetch it from our server location, and then we're going to parse it into JSON, and then we're just going to print it out. That means we have to change one more thing, because since we parsed it into JSON, we didn't do this here. So from Flask, they have something called JSONify, which allows us to return a dictionary in the form of JSON. So we're going to say message is hello, and then we're going to wrap this all inside JSONify. We're going to save this. We're going to go to our terminal. We're going to restart our server with this. It says press Control-C to quit, Control-C, up arrow to run it again, enter. It's going to refresh our web server. If I hit this again, if I refresh it, you'll see that we get now the JSON, which means that our front end, when we open up this console here, I refresh this, and I click me, it will give me a course error. And that's because we need to add one line of, or 2 lines of wrappers behind this. So we're going to do from Flask course import course, and then we wrap our app in course. And then I do need to install this. So we're going to do pip3 install Flask. Is it underscore course? Oh, no. It's dashboard, but I think that worked just fine too. So let's try that again. And we get, oh, I spelled something wrong in my front end code. It says response is not defined. That's because I did not spell this correctly. Response is not defined. All right, cool. Now we go back here, refresh this, boom, and we get our message. Okay, a lot of wizardry magic just happened there. What happened? So our front end, separate code base, is this HTML file. The user clicks this button, which calls this clicked function. And you can ignore this part for now, but what does it do? It fetches data from our server, and then it just prints it out. And then what does our server do? Once it hits our server, it hits the default endpoint / right? Because we hit just localhost 5000 / we didn't put like anything else after it, or like hello or anything like that. So it's saying that, hey, execute this function and then return this. And then it gets returned from our server, and then it gets printed out here. So then fully get this. That's usually like the hardest, like conceptual thing that people get their minds around. Is anyone confused? Is it actually no, does everyone understand this perfectly? Okay. Is anyone confused by what are people confused by? Just burn through any question.
Yeah, so if I'm just running the backend without having anything to front end with people.
Yeah, so that's a good question. If you just had the backend, you could technically have this, and then you could post this online, and technically this could be your website. It just gives you raw data back. Another thing is that Flask allows you to use a template, and you can technically return HTML. So like H1, I'm not sure if this works. I think this works. So if I do this, yeah, you can technically return HTML here. So technically, there's a way to like make Flask just return HTML, and you don't need a front end. That's not exactly true. That's still HTML. Right? Normally, what you want is you want to like separate these things all together so that your front end is your front end and your back end is your back end. And then it's just cleaner if you just make your back end only send over JSON data, like raw data, and leave your front end and determine how to display that data. Does that kind of make sense a little bit more? Cool. Other questions? I know there must be a bunch. And if your question is just like, what is going on, it's also fine too. This is an actually really hard concept to get behind. Yes.
Can I see again how Flask connects with the front end?
Yes. So This is your Floss code. All this is saying is we're gonna put this code and we're just gonna permanently run on the internet, which is what this is. This is still running, right? As you can tell. And what this is doing is it's constantly listening for anyone who's gonna send it a request. It's sitting on the internet and it has a URL and it says, hey, if someone hits my URL, then I process it. But right now it's not doing anything, it's just idling, listening, waiting for requests. But as soon as someone does send a request, your server kicks into action, which is done here, right? Every time I do this fetch statement, it will send a request and say, hey, let me get some data, I'm gonna fetch some data, right? The same thing as if you manually do it like this. The act of going on a website is also hitting a server. It's the only difference that you're getting an HTML file. So they're all using the HTTP protocol, the internet protocol. But yeah, this is how your front end hits the back end. It's through the internet, not through any code per se, which is why you can separate code bases altogether. Okay. Anything else? A little bit. All right. Okay, cool. Now we're going to make our application actually do something because right now it just says that. All right. So what are we going to do? We are going to use the Yelp API. That one's fun. And I love using that one. All right. So part of the hackathon is that you are allowed to use like any API, and in fact, you're encouraged to use an API because it'll supercharge your application and make it really, really fun to work with. Yelp API. Has anyone here used Yelp before? Has anyone not used Yelp? Okay, cool. Yeah, that's crazy. Everyone's used Yelp. So Yelp is a service that aggregates restaurants, businesses, and more importantly, reviews about them. But what they have is this ginormous repository of businesses, and you can tap into that. So what you want to do is, when you're looking at hackathon ideas, like look at a whole list of APIs and what they can do. Because every API on the surface, it doesn't seem like you can do that much, but then you dive into all the functionality they offer, it turns out that it's a lot. This specific workshop will go through Yelp. I have another one that's also linked on that main site that I showed you guys that I'll post later. That one goes over the Spoonnacular API for recipes, and then it shows you how to connect with that one. But we're going to go through this one. Let's use the business search. This is the most popular one. And you'll see that they give you a bunch of parameters, query parameters that you can use. And this is how you can fine tune your API results. Okay. You can think of this as like a ginormous Python function, and it just allows you to pass in all these parameters and get anything that you'd like. Okay. You'll see that there's a couple required ones. The required ones are going to be location. So you need to either put in a location or a latitude, longitude. See, it's required if location is not provided. Everything else is just optional. So if you just put in location, it'll just get you a list of stuff near you. Now, for all API usages, I highly recommend using a tool, either Insomnia or Postman. So the one that I tend to, what is this? The one I tend to use is called Insomnia. Oh, look, I already have one up. It's probably from the last workshop. So we're going to create a new one. I'm going to create a, actually, let's go through the back. Yeah, so you're going to create like a local scratchpad, and you're going to create a new request. And we just fill out this form. The whole thing is we just fill out this form, and it allows to test an API. Okay. Yeah, let's just go through it so we can see how this works. So how do we call an API? Well, the API will give us a reference. There's probably like a quick start somewhere here that you should probably read, but I'll walk you guys through it. So essentially, every API starts out with an endpoint, a URL. We're going to copy that. In this case, it says the search. It's a GET request, and we're going to get from here. So we go here. It's a GET request. Yes. And we paste the URL. That's all we do. And then we click, wait, we have detected orphaned project. That sounds so sad. Okay, we're going to click the send. And then immediately, let's make this a little bit bigger. We get an error, which is the good side, because it says that we are hitting something correctly. And it says authorization is a required parameter. Okay, so that means, hey, I didn't understand the Yelp API well enough. I need to Google Yelp authorization, whatever. And then there's like a whole, what the heck? Yelp API auth. Boom. And then you can just probably read one of these many links and they'll tell you how to do it. But luckily, I already know how to do this because I've done this so many times. I've read it. And then they're going to say, hey, go to your account. You should always have an account. And then you're going to create an app. And then every app is going to have an API key. Now, this is a secret. Don't tell anyone. Which means I'm going to have to refresh my API key after this recording. Nobody take this right now. So I'm going to copy this API key. And then if you read through the entire thing, they're going to tell you it's like a bearer key. Bear. There, it's a bearer API key. And so we're going to go to our auth section and they're going to say, hey, it's a bearer token. Here's the token. Paste that. And now we send. And now we get a different error. Now we get a validation error again, but it's going to say, please specify a location and a latitude and longitude. And getting an error is always bad. Well, no, I said it was good earlier. Getting an error is usually bad, but the fact that we get a different error means that we've now unlocked another step of the puzzle. So please specify a location or latitude, longitude. I remember seeing that in the business search API. It says, hey, you need to put a location or latitude or longitude. And so let's put in a location. So it says these are query parameters. So we're going to go to our parameters, query parameters. Let's add one. And it's called location. And the value, let's put Irvine. And then I'm going to just a little bit bigger. Oh, it takes a little bit longer. Ah! And then this is our data back. We get a list of businesses. Let's see how many. 20 businesses. And they say there's a total of 9,300 that we can query through. We probably have to paginate through them. And then you can see every single item. And this is the data that Yelp gives back to us. So it's saying, hey, there are 20 restaurants that or businesses, and then they give you all this information about it. The ID, that's a unique ID they use. You can use an image of them. You can use review count, all this stuff. The whole world of Yelp at your fingertips. Is that cool or what? Yes? Oh my goodness, everyone's so excited. All right. So now that we've done this in Insomnia, it's like, okay, thanks. Like, what are we going to do with this? What Insomnia is really good for, and also Postman can do this as well, is that there's going to be this like little triangle drop down. You barely see it. I click on that, and then there's this amazing button. It says generate code. Holy, we can write code without doing any code. And they can tell you which language you want to generate this API call from. And since we're using Python, I already selected it, Python. And then you can choose which library we like, requests. And then we're going to copy this. Oh, there's a copy to clipboard. Wow, they thought of everything. All right. And then we're going to go to our VenusHacks backend. And best practice says to put this in a new file, but we don't care. So we're going to put it right there. Oh my goodness. Okay, let's get rid of all of this really quick. Oh, we should definitely, no, let's put it in another file. It'll be so much easier. Let's call this yelp.py. We're going to save this here. And then it says we need to import requests, which we don't have. So we're going to do pip install requests. Boom. And then let's run our Python file here. Python yelp.py. Okay. If you can read this, this is actually that exact same thing that we got over there, over here. It's the exact same data here, except it's just not formatted. You can pick out parts of it of similarity. Oh, there's key concepts right there. Oh, this is sup for sure. Yeah, it's sup. So now we've been able to make this same API call, but in Python, right? And then now we can connect everything together. So, and also like you can still like edit parts of this. This was generated, but like it's still readable, right? Like here's a dictionary, query string, location, : Irvine. Here's our bearer token and all this stuff. So what do we want to do? Let's go ahead and put all this in like a function. So def get restaurants. Okay, and then we tab all this. And then we don't want to use the response.text. We're going to return response.json. And then at the very bottom here, let's just print out response, or let's print out get restaurants. Okay, this should give us literally the exact same thing. And it gives us the exact same thing. We just put inside a function and we call this function, right? Now, what would be cool? What if we had some like more extensibility into this application? Instead of just hard coding businesses in Irvine, what if we did, ooh, let's do it spicy. Let's make it a variable, location. And it gets passed in here, location. So now we can just say, hey, give me everything in New York. And then we're gonna have to parse this somehow. Does this look like New York? Oh, there you go, New York. NY 10014. So now it's giving you all the businesses in New York. Right now we have a dynamic function that we can use. How much time do we have? 50 minutes? Do you want to make this more fun? Okay, let's go for another one. Let's add one more thing. So you can also add terms here, categories. Let's filter by term. So let's go ahead and just manually add this term. And since we're from Irvine, we're gonna get only boba stores by location. So we're gonna change this to get. Are they called restaurants? Boba stores. And we're gonna change this. And now we transformed our application from just a restaurant generating application to a boba store locator. Oh my goodness, this is so cool. So this should give us all of the boba stores in New York. And it looks pretty juice bars. Okay, we're gonna ignore that one. But shaved ice. Yeah, these look like boba stores for the most part. I don't know. There's bubble tea in some of them. So, Irvine will probably work. Actually, let's just do Irvine just so I can verify like manually. I know the names. Oh, there's Orobe. Wait, is closed is false? Wait, they opened again? A little bit of Irvine lore. Okay, all right, cool. So now let's hook this up to our actual application, right? So now what we can do here is we can say, when someone passes us let's do a query parameter. So let's do Flask query parameters. And the reason why I'm Googling this is because I actually don't know off the top of my head. So we're about to find out. How to do a query parameter? Oh, literally just like this. Okay. So users are going to hit this endpoint, right? And then they're going to call this function, this get boba stores function. And what we want to do here is actually we want to import it. So we're going to do from Yelp, because we named this file yelp.py, import get boba stores. And then this needs to take in a location, right? Location. And what we can do, I just copied and pasted this thing. How do we get like a dynamic thing from the user? We can actually pass them into the URL. These are called query parameters, right? It's actually very similar to the way we did it for Yelp. But what we're going to do, we also have to import this request Flask, and we're going to say get location. We'll call this location. And then it gets passed into here. And then let's just return, let's call this Yelp response equals to this Yelp response. 3 lines of code. Let's see how this works. Let's go to let's close this. Let's run our Flask app again. Okay. And then what we can do here is we're going to go to our localhost 5000. And it's going to say, hey, remember this error? This is for our Yelp error. It says, please specify location or latitude, longitude. And how do we specify a query parameter? With a question mark. Location equals to Irvine. And now this is us hitting we can pretty print this so we can see. This is us hitting our backend server, which calls the Yelp API, adds the both keyword, gets that data back, sends it back to the caller. And this is like halfway through the process. Has everything that just happened in the past 5 minutes made sense to everyone? Any questions? Anyone lost? What are we lost with? Everything? All right. So, really quickly, does this part make sense? This function? Sort of, right? This is just stuff that we copy and pasted, so it doesn't have to make sense to us. We just copy and paste it, right? And then what we're doing is we're just returning it. So this function will, there's a function, get photo source, it takes in the location, and then depending on what user passes in here, we're gonna return the what we have to return to us. All we do here in our app.py function is we're wrapping it in Flask. Because before it was just a Python script, which means that like this is just a Python script. How am I running this function? I have to run on my terminal, right? No user is actually going to be running code on the terminal. You can't tell someone to install your Python script and then run it. Like that's not going to work. And so what we do is we wrap it in a web server, and the web server allows it to let anyone, anywhere that's connected to the internet can now access our Python function. That's all it is. So anyone who goes to what is it? Localhost 5000, they are able to access our application. Now the thing is, it's localhost, which means it's actually only on my personal machine. So it's not connected to the real internet, it's my computer's internet. What I can do is I have something called, we might go over time, I have something called ngrok, which allows me to tunnel this, HTTP 5000. And now this will tunnel my localhost 5000 port onto this URL. So like, if anybody, honestly, here, let's go to the Slack. Let's go to, yeah, let's go to workshops. All right, if you guys are in the Slack, go to workshops. You can try hitting this URL. And then you will be able to, I see some people hitting it. You can hit that. And then you can also probably append /Irvine or location equals to Irvine question mark location equals to Irvine at the end of it or whatever. And anyone should go back. Has anyone been able to hit that URL? Just curious. Did it work? Right? From the internet, anyone can access. That's the point of using Flask. Is that anyone, we've now taken our Python function that just lists the script, posted it on the internet, and anyone can hit it. Does that part make sense? A little bit. I'm happy to burn this out to the depths for you guys. As far down, I want to make sure you guys are solid. Oh my goodness, everyone's actually going on this. Oh, cool. So also one cool thing about Flask is that you can see what people are hitting. So some people put Mexico, a lot of Irvines, you can put whatever you like. Tijuana, we're going straight to Mexico with this one. Right, this is the point of like server logs. Have you ever heard of that concept? Right, people who are hosting servers, they can see who's hitting their service, obviously. This is how Yelp also is also seeing who's hitting their Yelp service, right? So this is our server. It's working. Everyone can. Ooh, this is smart. Someone put the term pizza, but notice that's not going to work because why? We did not expose that functionality. All we exposed was location. That's the only one that we did. If we wanted to do term as well, we could do like term and then say term, and then we have to pass in the term here, and then goes into here, term, and then we have to fill this one in with term. This would allow you to also do term as well. But I'm not going to save that because I want this to be Boba Store only. But that's a good, I like that attempt. Okay. Does that make sense? So essentially all Flask is doing, so just to recap for one more time, the first yelp.py file is putting our Python into creating a Python script that is going to be useful for the user. And then the second part is we had a Flask code, and the Flask is going to wrap that script and allow anyone to access it from the internet. I ran this extra ngrok thing just so you guys can see it because it's not actually on the real internet, it's on your local internet. But then now, the next thing that we want to do is we want our front end code to be able to hit that, right? Because exposing just a Python script is kind of boring, right? They just see that ginormous like wall text is not actually very helpful. The point of front end is to convert this data into a meaningful, interactive way for users to use, right? And so what we're going to do is we are going to go to our front end code here, and we hit that 5,000. We're going to add a location equals to, and then we'll put this, the user input. Do people see where I'm going with this now? Right, so now our fetch in our front end code, it's going to fetch that localhost 5,000, and it's an appended location with the user input, which we get from document.getElementById, user input, which is this input right here. And I'm going to get rid of this ginormous button. Like it's just the colors. I hate it. It's so bad. Let's do like, dude, whatever. Like I just can't with this button. It's so ugly. All right, so now it's like, wait, why is it still colored? Oh, sorry, it was bothering me. All right, so now we got our text thing. We can pass, is it location? Irvine, you can also put like, probably like a street address. I'm not gonna dox myself, but let's say like, okay, let's do Costa Mesa. And boom, it prints us all of our stuff. Now we just printed it in our console. Users aren't gonna see this. So what is the point of front end? The point of front end is that we're supposed to convert this raw data into visual components that people can use. Okay. Crystal, is there another thing in here after 2? Just curious. Okay. We're gonna have to wrap this up in like 2 minutes. All right. So let's make it somewhat pretty, right? So we have this response, and then this is a gigantic JSON object. So we're gonna loop through this, right? So there's a property called businesses. There's 20 arrays, and then we're gonna go through all of them. So I'll just write it out so you guys can see what's gonna happen. But essentially, we go, let's say businesses. That's hard to spell. Response.businesses, and then we're gonna say businesses dot for each. You know what? Let's just write a traditional for loop so we don't confuse anyone. For let I equals to 0, I must be less than businesses dot length. I plus plus, and then we're just going to do this. Oh, shoot, it's gone. Document dot get element by ID, and I called it display. I did. Dot display dot inner HTML equals or plus equals 2. And we're going to use these special kinds of strings, and we're going to say h1 slash h1 $sign this, and we're going to say businesses of I dot, I don't want alias. Is there like a name? Is there a name? Name. And we're almost in the home stretch. We're almost there. Promise. I pinky promise. What are we gonna do? We're gonna put an image just so images people like that. Image underscore URL businesses of I dot image underscore URL. Bada bing, bada boom, Mr. Worldwide. As I step in the room, and I already know it's gonna work. Boom. And you're gonna want to write some CSS formatting for this. And now we just rendered all 20 locations that gives us name, image. There's a whole bunch of other data we get to use. Right. So the reason why we could technically just have this with our backend, and it gets us just the raw data, not very helpful. What we want to do is we want to have HTML as well to convert that into a bigger component that you can break down. Make sense? A little bit? Is that a question, Taesung?
Well, why do we need the cluster? Why can't we just call the yellow guy from the front?
So that's a good question. This is because Yelp is dumb and they have a setup where you can't actually directly call it from the front end. You can proxy it, so that's
More important.
huh?
You did.
Oh, yeah, you'd be exposing your front end or your API. But they don't like it. This is what we don't care about that at hackathon, but yes. Okay, I'm gonna set this up. I will be, can I just stop sharing and then just end? Okay, cool. Thanks, y'all.